All right, so whenever I'm trending over something that's just not that big of a deal, I know that there's something the establishment wants to hide. It's called a media overreaction, and that always means that there's something that you've accidentally landed upon that they don't really want to be exposed. And this is sort of what happened when on Monday, I did this whole long episode about why I am now rejecting the cult of science. So many things that they've lied to us about: vaccines, birth control, people that are being injured, and we just accept everything the experts say, and we're sacrificing our own bodies. It just feels strange. It feels wrong. When you look further in the history, they just keep lying and getting away with it. What I said was that science has become a pagan faith. Yes, that's what I actually believe. And I said, if I don't get it from the Bible and I can't observe it with my own eyes, I don't stand it as the truth. Another example of a recent media overreaction, of course, was when Tucker sat down with Joe Rogan and he started talking about World War II and how we shouldn't have dropped nukes on, praying Christians. And they freaked out, like questioning the nuke thing is not allowed. And again, I thought, Tucker must be landing on some truth that they don't want exposed. And lately, we are learning that they've lied to us about virtually everything pertaining to World War II. But it is this piece of the Tucker conversation with Joe Rogan that I keep insisting that you guys commit to memory. So take a listen one more time.
There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world that's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. Like, no one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ. But the core idea does not differ, and never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times.
To be clear, that is what I believe made the media freak out. They dressed it up in, the morality of World War II and the bomb. But I think it was actually this. I'm starting to see a trend that every time you start talking about the Bible, you start talking about God, you start talking about spiritualism, and recognizing that America and the West is an anomaly, that there are spiritual forces that are working on people at all times, the media panics, because the media, in my view, is a bit satanic. I genuinely believe this, and so did one of the people that was watching this trend. I had a random user reach out and say, the reason they're freaking out is because NASA is satanic. The origins of NASA are satanic. And I went, what? What are you talking about? And OMG, you guys, buckle up. What I'm about to tell you, you're not even going to believe me, but you can just research this. You don't even have to go down a dark hole on Reddit. You can just literally open Wikipedia. It is so in our faces, and yet we don't learn about this. And now I understand why they are very upset with me. So you may have heard of a man named Aleister Crowley. If you haven't, I'll provide you with some brief spark notes. Aleister Crowley was an Englishman. He was also a drug abuser. He was a bisexual who is credited with heavily influencing the eventual counterculture revolution of the 60s in America. Free love, free love. Yeah, that book, Chaos. Things got weird and satanic in the 60s in America. And America is where this Englishman, Aleister Crowley, eventually moved. But what he is most famous for is black magic. He was an occultist who pledged his allegiance to demons. He believed that he could summon demons, okay? The story goes that when he was 13 years old, he read the book of Revelation in the Bible, and he became inspired, not by Jesus Christ, but by the seven-headed beast that is ridden by the whore of Babylon. So in case you are somebody that's not familiar with the Bible and Revelations, they talk about this seven-headed beast that rules over every tribe and people and tongue and nation, okay? So it's satanic. It's a satanic beast. When Aleister got older, he started a religious cult, a satanic cult known as the Lima. Crowley believed that the number of the beast, 666, was significant. He believed that humanity was entering in a new eon and that his religious motto, which was do what thou wilt, would rule it, right? He believed that actually he could create this beast and rule over nations by practicing rituals. He routinely practiced sex rituals. He believed in masochistic and sadistic sex, believed in free love. and he was very much connected to the elite in America. He was just openly publishing articles for Vanity Fair because he was best friends with their editor, and many of the elite in our society were his followers and believers. A Satanist. This is a fact. You can look this up. One such follower was a man named Jack Parsons, another wealthy young man. And here's what you should know about this time period. Before Jack Parsons enters the scene in America, the scientific consensus was that we would never enter space, that was an impossibility. But this rich kid, who also happens to be an occultist and who also would perform sex rituals and blood sacrifice to summon demons, well, no, he expressed the belief that they could fundamentally alter humanity, and he had a vision. He said, no, we can make this work. We can get to space. Check out this article. Again, this is published. You can look this up yourself. Here's the headline: Sex, Rocket Science, and Satanism. Meet NASA's real hidden figures. And I'm going to read you directly from this article because it's so unbelievable. My jaw was on the floor. I'm skimming through it because it's way too long. It would make this show forever, but we will link it, and you absolutely must read it. It reads, quote, Jack Parsons is barely acknowledged on NASA's website, and he's the man who made rockets a reality and co-founded the agency's Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL, home to missions which paved the way for the Apollo programs and continue to explore Mars and outer space today. If Parsons' life story was a film script, it would be dubbed preposterous. He invented jet propulsion technology in the face of industry-wide derision that rockets would never exist, but was also a senior figure in the occult and invited L. Ron Hubbard, yes, L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology, into his confidence and riotous sex parties. Parsons tried to sell his government-funded inventions to Israel before winding up dying at the age of 37 in a self-created explosion, leaving a mass of disturbing materials for his friends to discover. Here's the remarkably twisting tale of his life. So he too, like Aleister Crowley, was just interested in the demonic when he was young. He also liked science fiction. His story begins when he's 14 years old. And as a fan of science fiction, he decides to begin experiments that would eventually shape his life with his school friend named Edward Foreman. The pair took to playing with rockets in Parsons' back garden and soon created their own solid-fueled rockets. It was here that Jack would begin to link science with Satanism. Parsons later claimed he first summoned the devil at age 13 in a terrifying experience. Jack and Ed would later attend and then drop out of college. In 1936, they met a 22-year-old Frank Molina, who was a grad student who shared their passion for defying gravity. When Parsons and Molina met, their enthusiasm for rocketry and space travel bonded them like a Masonic handshake, one writer says. I'm sure it did. Molina helped by getting their research funded by Caltech, and their experiments were quite dangerous. There were a lot of explosions. And so he and his friends became known as the Suicide Squad. They decided to move their experiments into the desert, and this part is just amazing. I'm going to read you a direct quotation here. Once again, Jack's fascinations with the occult and rocketry collided. In the desert lands outside of Caltech, there is a former river channel called Arroyo Seco. It is flanked on both sides by rock, one of which is called Devil's Gate, thanks to its shape of a horned head. Some locals believed the mouth of Arroyo Seco was a portal to other dimensions. But for Parsons, the area had two uses. He tested rockets there, but years later, he would return to conduct ceremonies and rituals with other occultists in the same spot. By golly, guys, what then happens is that on Halloween of all nights in 1936, they have a scientific breakthrough after they accidentally set fire to the oxygen line of their small rocket motor. And although it didn't launch, Molina and his team were enthused. They said this test was successful. He wrote to his parents, and NASA would later consider that experiment, which happened again on Halloween, to be the first rocket experiment of what would later become the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So there was a method to the Suicide Squad's madness. They had created a fuel that would burn cleanly and be stored without exploding. And the scientific community was skeptical, but the U.S. Army saw potential, and they offered to fund the Trio's project in 1939. So great. A satanic little cult meets the United States government. Thereafter, Jack's credibility in the scientific community soared, and so did his interest in the supernatural and the demonic. He was taken to a meeting of OTO, which stands for the Order of Templi Orientis, an occult society in Los Angeles in 1939, and he became fully engrossed. If you're wondering what OTO is, it was a group that was formed by and followed the teachings of Aleister Crowley. Again, the heroin-addicted sexual deviant and occultist who was considered the wickedest man in the world by the press in his native England. Parsons went from just reading Crowley's writings to becoming the Beast 666's pen pal. Within a few years, Crowley considered Parsons his American protege. Parsons was barely in his mid-20s, and he was not at all concerned with keeping his personal and professional proclivities separate. The article tells us that the California Tech ran stories at the time that reported that he chanted Crowley's hymn before he lit his rockets. They're just chanting satanic, demonic hymns before they lit these rockets, guys. This is not a joke. This is not a test. This is history that is hiding right under your nose. By 1941, he and his wife, Helen, who he had married 5 years earlier, were indicted into what was known as the Agape Lodge, which was a branch of the church which practiced Crowley's religion of thelemic magic. Then they came into money. They founded the Aerojet Engineering Corporation, which became the world's largest manufacturer of rockets and propellants. And within 20 years, it had become a $700 million a year business. Parsons was the vice president. A year later, he co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So now that he's rich, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You've got government contacts, you've got money, you're having sex rituals. Well, he just is going to make the whole demonic sex rituals bigger because obviously it has led to success, summoning demons, believing in Satan. And what he did next was he took out a lease on a mansion in Pasadena's Millionaires Row on Orange Grove Avenue and invited fellow Thelemites to live communally in what was known as the parsonage. This is really kind of the earliest iteration of a hippie commune, if you ask me. And of course, if you've read that book, Chaos, you just are going, OMG, Candace. So what did they do at the parsonage? Well, the parsonage had 10 bedrooms, but its greatest asset, for Parsons at least, according to this article, was its additional 3-bedroom coach house, which became an Agape Lodge. The commune was self-sufficient, maintaining allotments and livestock to eat and use for blood rituals. Those were the tame events. The blood rituals were the tame events that unfolded at the parsonage. The residents of the Orange Grove made frequent complaints to the police about loud music, drug taking, and the naked pregnant women that were dancing through fire in the garden. This is totally normal stuff, guys. Just, coming up with NASA and jet propulsion, you sometimes got to have a naked pregnant woman dancing in the garden through fire. Parsons would greet people at the door with a live snake wrapped around his shoulders. And when the police would turn up, he would tell them, hey, look, I'm a Caltech scientist. There's no trouble going on here. I'm connected. I'm connected to the government. I've got money. You leave me alone. And I guess they just left him alone. Somehow this is going to get creepier, guys, because in the mid-40s, Jack decided that he wanted to push the barriers of his Satanism a little more, pushing the barriers of thelemic magic to a new level. He wanted to take the spirit of Babylon, the goddess that they worshipped, and instill it into a human being. In short, he wanted to impregnate a woman that he believed to have certain powers so that she would give birth to a child that would embody the forces of Babylon. So between January and March of 1946, we're coming now to the end of World War II. So think about what Tucker said. Hubbard, again, that's L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology, assisted Parsons in a series of rituals that they called Babylon working. And on January 18th, a woman named Marjorie Cameron, who had red hair, turned up at the parsonage, and he believed that this is it. This is the Scarlet Woman that he had called forth via his rituals. The moment had arrived. It is done, Parsons told Hubbard. I returned home and found a young woman answering the requirements waiting for me. I thought I had the most morbid imaginations, but it seems I have not. If you're wondering who that redheaded woman was, she was a woman that had been recently discharged from the Navy. She had a free spirit. She happened to have red hair. She was happy to have sex with Parsons because, again, they promoted free love. Hubbard was then promoted to a position of high priesthood mere weeks after being exposed to the Thelemic black magic, and he incanted rite and ritual. Some of it he did completely off of the cuff. What was the result? Well, afterwards, on March 6th, Parsons wrote enthusiastically to Aleister Crowley. He wrote, quote, "I can hardly tell you or decide how much I want to write. I am under command of extreme secrecy. I have had the most important, devastating experience of my life." Crowley responded to him, writing, quote, "You have me completely puzzled by your remark. I thought I had the most morbid imagination, but it seems I have not. I cannot form the slightest idea what you can possibly mean." Well, what Parsons meant was he had created a moon child. That's what they were trying to create, a moon child as their final experiment, creating a child of Babylon. The ending of the story, by the way, which we're coming to, gets a little bit shady. They say that apparently after all of that, after impregnating this woman, after chanting after the sex rituals, after driving this woman forth, that she agreed to have an abortion. Parsons then came under the investigation of the FBI. They believe that he had been planning to give his rocket plans to the newly founded Israeli government in exchange for admission to the country and the chance of a new life abroad. Then he died rather mysteriously, Jack Parsons, in an explosion. Some claim he was suicided. Some claim that it was an accident. Some claim that he never died and actually he just disappeared. Honestly, we'll never know. We don't need to peddle in conspiracy theory because in this story, truth is stranger than fiction. There you have it, guys. That's the origins of NASA and the program, the Jet Propulsion program, we're going to make it to space mission. But don't worry. It would be totally crazy for you guys to think that Satan worshipers are still involved in NASA. Obviously, after it got started, they went totally clean. Everything was been above board. Nobody believes in this stuff anymore. And everything's great and everything's normal. And now suddenly, I guess the goals of Aleister Crowley was to create a society that would deceive the entire world. Now suddenly in the West, we don't believe in any of this stuff. We look back on that story of a man who dedicated his entire life and an entire religious cult to summoning demons, saying that they had summoned them successfully, that they had experiences with Satan, and they were just being imaginative. Yeah, no. Satan can't possibly be real, right? So yeah, think back to what Tucker is saying, that suddenly after this period, exactly when this was going on, when people were following this religion and believing in Satan, and then suddenly Americans just kind of got on board the atheist train. And we just said, yeah, no, we don't believe in any of that stuff in spiritualism anymore. Instead, what we believe in is science, rationality. And God forbid someone like Candace start talking about the Bible. Oh my God, there she is. She's saying she doesn't just trust the science. Yeah, I'm saying actually a little bit more than that. I think science has become a bit satanic. They're telling you to do things that are utterly satanic, sacrificing your children in the name of science because it's just a clump of cells. It's getting weird out there. And I'm sorry that I notice. But that's all I'll say on that topic.